Welcome back to the State of Survival. Today we're talking about DayZ base building, part of our base building month. Dimension, why would anybody want to build a base in DayZ? This is a game about hardcore PvP, looting, shooting, dying, respawning, and doing it again.
Once you hit a certain amount of time spent in DayZ, once you've explored the map and you know the maps and you're to the point where you can survive and thrive for a longer period of time, I think base building is kind of your next step to the DayZ experience. For me, at the amount of hours that I have, DayZ is a little daunting and a little bit not inaccessible, but a little bit outside my purview. I don't really want to explore it too much yet because I'm still the person that's having trouble surviving for more than 3 or 4 in-game days.
To me, base building starts a lot earlier than building fences and gates or the watchtowers. Honestly, I think anything that you can store long term when you log out is base building. If it's on your character when you log out, it's a form of a base. And that comes into play with the small dry bags, the dry packs that you can wear as a backpack, the crates, the sea chests, and there's a couple of more other items that you can do that you can just bury. And one of the cool things is you can bury these things in graveyards or in trash piles and nobody will ever find them. You can do it in rivers. You can do it like cut down the tree and bury it there. So when the server restarts, the tree is blocking it. You just got to remember what tree it is. Otherwise, you kind of forget where it is. But one of my favorite things to do is to go to something that I know exactly where it is, find a rock or a tree that sticks out, and then to pull my compass out, look in that direction, and walk like 50 or 60 paces into a field, and then walk 30 paces in another direction, and then bury my stuff in the middle of a field.
The the fact that you can bury things in DayZ kind of brings back to memory our conversation on Project Zomboid about building stashes, like stash bases and checkpoints. You can kind of do that with DayZ and these burying of cases. And I like your point of using a landmark and then a compass to walk a certain amount of paces because unlike other survival games that we play, DayZ doesn't really have an in-game map that you can mark and reference and say, okay, I put a stash here and I put a stash here and I put a stash here. You just have to remember where you put stuff. Or
But wouldn't it be cool if they did that?
maybe make your own notes at home. You got to have a way to remember where you stashed your stuff, especially if your goal is to amass materials to build an actual base at some point.
I do want to point out, folks, I Survive with a Z is a great source to actually be able to see all of the DayZ maps, included the modded ones for PC, and you can create your own group and make marks and locations on that outside of the game. You can share it with your friends and have them be part of the group if you're working together. It's a great source. We're not sponsored by them. I just love that tool. Going to the next level of base building is improvised shelters. These come in a leaf foliage kind of look, a leather, or a tarp. Tarps can be found around the world as looting inside of sheds and shacks, and the leather can be made by combining a pelt with garden lime to make full fledged leather. The shelter stick one that creates the foliage and the leaf is actually my favorite. I don't know why we build the others because they stick out like a sore thumb, where the leaf and foliage one just takes a lot of sticks and a lot of effort to make, but it has 100 slots and it's a great way to store stuff so you can start building your fences and your walls or watchtowers.
I like the fact that there is this there's not only the stashes you can make, but there is this like lower tier to base building that doesn't require too much to get started, that you can build these small shelters, and they're more like storage than actual shelters. But again, like you said, you can start building there. You can start amassing your materials and your tools to actually build a base if you want to use something like that. When you actually dig into the actual full base building, you're going to need a lot of tools. You're going to need a lot of materials. Some of those materials you can gather from the trees and bushes around you. Some of those materials you're going to have to go loot from towns and train cars and the shipyards.
Yeah, definitely. Other places you can find the tools you need are inside of the small shacks or inside of the industrial buildings. Always look at the shelves. DayZ likes to hide them on the shelves. top, low, and top, bottom, look everywhere. And honestly, folks, as long as you are going on there as a mission to look for the tools, you will find a plethora of them. If you're looking for sharpening stones, I hate to tell you this, you're going to find way more axes and hatchets than you'll ever find sharpening stones. It's just easier to do that. One thing I would highly suggest is grab a bunch of small rocks and just use those to make stone knives for getting your sticks and other stuff for your improvised shelters or for the other things that you need around your base. Because technically, you will go through a knife real quickly. Just use stone knives. They're very, very easy to make. But moving on to the full fledged base building, the fences and the watchtowers. Did I mention what did you think about this? Just the brief understanding that you were kind of immersed into with building one fence.
I tried to build the fence before we actually ever talked about doing an episode on DayZ base building. I kind of wanted to experience a little bit of it, and I watched some YouTube videos and kind of followed a tutorial, and I got hung up literally on tools and materials. Um, you got to build, it's, what is it, a couple sticks, you got to have some rope, and then you got to have planks, but you also have to have like some kind of hammer or the hatchet. You can use the hatchet as the hammer to put everything together. You can't use like an actual wood cutting axe, things like that. Like there's certain tools you need that won't work for certain areas of base building, and that's kind of where I got hung up before. But once you know what you need to get these things started, and once you know what tools you can and can't use, it the building of a base in DayZ becomes a lot less daunting. For me, the dauntingness, I guess is the right word of date for base building in DayZ, was not having like a recipe menu, not having something that told me you need these 5 items to build this piece of your base. You just kind of have to either now look things up online and learn, or have people that have experience like you and Red to teach you, or you just kind of have to experiment and hopefully put the right amount of things together to make a fence.
Yeah, I will have to say, I kind of wish Daisy had a little bit of better feedback towards the player because once you know how to build a fence, it's easy. But for anyone getting new into the game and wanting to do base building, having to go outside the game to know what you need to actually build the very frame, because you can put the posts down, and that's kind of common sense. Use a shovel, okay. But then the next part is kind of common sense too. But you're right. There are plenty of blunt objects that you can have in your hand that would make sense, common sense. And we mentioned that in our video, what could be better in DayZ. Maybe they can make more of those objects usable, but right now they're not. And I think that there would be kind of a cool feedback system if, like, you looked at the fence and it told you that you need a hammer or a hatchet, or maybe there was some sort of icon on base building where it shows a hammer and it has a slash through it with like a hatchet next to it, like a ghost icon that they do for their attachments.
Well, something that you guys pointed out to me and that I never really thought about in the base building of DayZ is it you kind of have the same concept in my opinion of like Rust, where you should be building like walls within walls and gates within gates. When you're building a base in DayZ, it shouldn't just be, hey, I'm going to go take over this barn and I'm going to throw up a gate on both ends and I'm going to block off the side doors and be done with it. Like you should protect yourself. You should protect the items you have stored in your base, whether that be with traps, whether that be with more fences and more gates, whether that be with barbed wire. You shouldn't just put up 4 walls and a couple of gates. You should be considerate of what someone's going to run into if they try to get into your base.
And I think before we move on to rating, I want to tell people that you can build a flagpole, which requires a sledgehammer and large stones. So you're probably going to have to get a pickaxe. Actually, you have to get a pickaxe to get large stones. But this allows you to refresh the status of all of your walls and everything else inside of your base within, I think, a 50-meter radius. It's pretty large if you use feet. I think that's like almost 150 feet. But building a flag refreshes everything. If you do not have a flag, don't worry. All base items take 45 days to decay. So there is that. Flag's very easy. You build a flag, you hoist a flag all the way to the top, and it refreshes the persistence of all of your walls, watchtowers, etc., even inside of storage and barrels and stuff like that. Um, on another note, you can't bury barrels. If you're been able to do in the past, it was on a modded server. But let's move on to the raiding portion of this because raiding is just as important as base building in this game. And whether you're layering your walls, like you said, or setting traps, it matters bigly how you decide to do that. Now, we're going to talk about the default values when it comes to base raiding, but you can raid with guns, explosives, or melee. You can't smash a car into someone's base or do other weird tricks, but you can use all three of those categories to raid a base. And honestly, folks, I have to say bullets do not penetrate through fences. So you can be standing on the other side of a fence as somebody's raiding it, and once that top fence goes away, you can pop them in the face and be like with a good old "hello, welcome to my base" kind of shotgun blast. But yeah, it's fun.
I disagree with what you said, the semantics of what you said in one section. It's nothing terrible. It's not that you said anything wrong, but you said any other crazy things or something along those lines. The only thing I disagree with that is if you're going to raid someone's base, use a little bit of your creativity before you go just trying to break down somebody's walls, unless you have explosives, because those will make things faster. But before you go just trying to crash in, explore the outside, look for weaknesses, look for weak points. Something that you did while red was kind of teaching me how to build the gate before we put the barbed wire on, when we built our fence like up against one of the big sliding barn doors, but there was a gap at the top and we didn't have barbed wire on. You were able to hop up there on top of that fence and kind of go prone and be able to get into the base that way without breaking down any walls, without breaking through any doors or breaking any fences. Now, if someone's been building bases in DayZ regularly or they've already got their barbed wire up, things like that might not work. But use your creativity. Save some of that ammo, save some of those explosives, and see if there's a way in without going crazy yet. And then if there's not, then go in there, grenades and guns blazing, I guess.
I absolutely love you pointing it out because using barns or other places inside of DayZ is great to obscure your base. If you're able to build your base inside of a building, whether it be a lone building in the middle of nowhere or a building inside of a big city, but if you can make it not look like there's a base in there, but it's just a regular vanilla building, is one of the best ways to kind of do urban camouflage using the surroundings to do so. And I know that you can attach camo nets to your fences and stuff, but honestly, they don't do a good enough job out in nature to really camouflage. And just be smart about it. When you build a base, think about how can I make this base look the least, a golden nugget in the mud, essentially, right? You don't want to stick out like a sore thumb. And I think that's really important, especially when it comes to base rating, because base rating, like Dimension said, is all about vulnerabilities. Maybe you've built up a double layer fence, but there's that one area that you haven't built. If there is a building they can see into your base from far above, like apartments or another kind of building, they can find where you're missing one wall inside that double layer and go, okay, we're going to break in there.
I would say that it is something that is worth experimenting on, but I think it's something best saved for late game once you've experienced a lot more of DayZ, once you've put a lot of hours into DayZ.
That's fair enough. My opinion on this is because we talked about the ability to bury things, the improvised shelters, sticking with that early on and creating, let's say, called stashes. You can even actually create your own Bambi kit stashes based off of where you spawn as a Bambi. It's actually kind of a fun thing that I've seen some people do. They put a gun, food, some other things in there when they are like fully geared up and they go back to the coast and they bury these little stashes around the Bambi spawn points. And then all you need is a shovel to dig it up. But I think DayZ base building is intimidating at first, but once you start getting into the burying, the improvised shelters, and then finally building your fences and watchtowers, you finally start to experience a new side of DayZ other than uh, spawn fresh, loot, die, repeat. Folks, thanks very much for joining us on the State of Survival. Please remember to click that like button and subscribe. Join me in thanking Dimension 119 and Red Falcon for always being here and helping the show keep going. Ta-ta for now.
See you in another dimension.